Writing your research proposal and introduction, part 1. At the end of this lecture, you should be able to identify the major components of a research proposal. The contents of this video include the typical contents of a research proposal, what is research, the purpose of a research proposal, the length, front page, title, table of contents, the executive summary, chapter 1, chapter 2 and chapter 3, the references, the Gantt chart, the budget, the plagiarism policy, and the registration. So let's look at what are the typical contents of a research proposal. So remember, when you are preparing a research proposal, you shouldn't miss any of these contents. Number 1 is your front page. You must have your table of contents. You must have your executive summary, chapter 1 that outlines the introductions of your research study, chapter 2 that is your literature review, chapter 3 that is your methodology, and then after the chapters you must list all the references that you have cited in your write-up and follow the APA referencing systems. You must also outline the budget that you need to conduct your study, the timeline or the Gantt chart of the whole process of your preparing your proposal until you complete your report writing, the plagiarism policy, study registrations, and the appendices. Okay, we are not going to discuss lengthy in each of these contents because our future lectures or lesson we will be looking at each one of these content in depth. Okay, so we'll be discuss we will be given the guidelines and on how to write what are the contents on in each of these contents in a typical research proposal. So first, before we move on, again, just to remind us, what is research? So research is an activity undertaken systematically and creatively to find the evidence and to unravel the knowledge related to a certain topic. So remember, the key word here is systematically. So what is the purpose of writing a research proposal? A research proposal now is a requirement for your graduations. A research proposal is required to convince others, that is the evaluators, the reviewers, grant providers, audience, that the project is worth to research or to study. Research proposal is required to provide evidence on the problem that need to be searched or solved through a systematic investigations, and lastly to convince that the researcher has the capacity, knowledge, competency, and well organized to conduct the study. So what is the typical length of a research proposal? So please check with your school what is the required length of a research proposal, and also finally the length of your report or your thesis. But ideally for a research proposal, you are required to write about 3,000 to 5,000 words. It has to be very brief but concise and use exact words in your writing. If your dissertation examines several research questions, consider separating distinct research questions into individual chapters. Narrow the focus to a specific topic for each chapter. And of course, in order for you to write a good proposal, you need to be fluent in English and must have a good writing skills that you can actually learn from many ways. Okay, so typically you must have your front page where you have the title of your research proposals, your name and the name of the supervisor. And there are many ways in writing your research title. Basically, you can you can choose a format. The common format is to write your titles in descriptive format, declarative or interrogative title. But we will discuss this further in our next. Alright. So then you must have the table of contents so that when your reader look through or read your research proposals, they will be guided through your table of contents. Okay, now also you must have your executive summary, because normally a reader, they will go straight to the executive summary just to have some idea on what is your study about. Okay, now moving to chapter 1. Chapter 1 is the introductions of the study, where you have to write about the background of the study, the problem statement clearly. You must write your research questions or research objectives based on the problems. Okay, then your research hypothesis based on your research objective, the significance of the study, why is it important for you to conduct the study, and then the scope and delimitations of the study, and define all the terms that you use in the proposal. You have to define them operationally. And what are the terms that you define? Normally is your dependent variables, independent variables, if you have confounding variables, and maybe you want to define the setting and also your study population. Okay, some proposals, they also insert the conceptual framework and the dependent and independent variables in chapter 1. Okay, so having completed your chapter 1, now is your chapter 2. Okay, remember that writing literature review is ongoing. Okay, so what you need to write in your literature review, these include the conceptual framework or the theoretical framework, a review of previous studies, and based on that you must highlight the gaps in the previous study. Okay, so then chapter 3 is your methodology or your methods, where you actually write the technical part of the methods on how you are going to collect the data. So you must tell what is the design of the study, who are the participants, why you choose the participants, what are the criteria for you to include or to exclude the participants, and whether they are voluntary participants, and whether you have given them concise informations about the study, and they must agree to participate. Okay, so inform the settings, and sometimes you need to tell why you choose that setting, the ethics considerations, permissions to conduct the study, the sampling methods, the sample size calculations, the variables, instrumentations, the interventions, the data collection procedure, the study flow chart in a form of a diagram or a figure, and how are you going to manage and analyze your data. These are all the contents that you need to include in your methodology. Okay, and then your references. How many references do you think that is enough? Okay, it depends on your study. Ideally, I would say you probably need about 30 to 100 references. Okay, so the referencing styles, okay, you must know that we are only using APA referencing styles in our faculty. So please refer to the current updates. The faculty will tell you which editions that you need to follow. Okay, and then the Gantt chart or the timeline. This will outline the stages, okay, the timing and the of the stages in your research planning. And the appendix or the appendices, okay, normally these include permission to conduct the study in the selected setting. So you must have that evidence, a letter from the institutions that to permit you to conduct the study. Permissions to obtain the data. Normally, sometimes if your study involve taking secondary data for you to analyze, or also known as retrospective data, you must also must obtain permissions, okay. And then the ethics approval, you need to obtain ethics for research in human subjects. You need to include the subject in informed consent in your appendix. The information sheet, the study protocol. You know, sometimes you have the procedures or the steps for you to do the certain measurements. Okay, you can include them in the appendices. And then the questionnaires, you know, sometimes you have a very long questionnaire. You don't put them in the chapter 3, but you put them in the appendix. Okay, and probably you have images, pictures that you cannot put in chapter 3, then you put them in the appendix. Right, so for plagiarism policy, okay, we will have a special talk about plagiarism, okay. But yes, once you complete your research proposal, before you submit to the supervisor, or before it undergoes examinations, okay, you will be checked, okay, or you must provide evidence that your similarity index is less than probably 30%, or some faculty, they go as low as about 5 to 10% only. And some studies you probably need to register. So these are the platform where you can register your study. Just to warn you that you must remember your research proposal is confidential. It is the intellectual property of the university, and you cannot simply share your research proposal if it is unfinished or you have not published them in any journals, okay. So others may plagiate, okay, or may steal your ideas. All, thank you very much for your attention.